Welcome to Haptik platform training. Today we will discuss about WhatsApp bot building guidelines. This video should help you create your first WhatsApp bot end to end. For this video, I have created a demo bot called as self-defense. Let us go inside to find out what are the major intents being taken care of on this bot. As you can see, there are 4 nodes on the bot: main menu, introduction, types of moves, and register. So there are 4 major intents being handled on the bot. Main menu node helps us to cater to all possible conversations starters a user can come and use on the bot. If you see, under user says of main menu, I have written statements like menu, show me main menu, start, please start. Now these are essentially conversation starters used by any user on a WhatsApp bot. The other 3 nodes are taking care of each of those specific intents. Introduction takes care of introducing the user to self-defense. Types of moves takes care of what are those different types of moves which women can use for self-defense. And register node takes care of the intent where the users ask for registration. Now let us see what all needs to be kept in mind when we are building a WhatsApp solution with all these intents. The first point to keep in mind is WhatsApp doesn't support rich media text or carousels, buttons, or quick replies as bot responses. The solution we have for that is we would be using textual messages with numerical options given in that. Users can type 1, 2, 3, 4 for navigating across the bot. Or they can use alphabets like A, B, C, D to look at any particular option. The second thing to keep in mind while we are building a WhatsApp bot is how do we create transitions from one node to the other. As we would only be having numerics or alphabets as options given under the bot responses, how do we take care of the bot not getting confused in such scenarios, and also how do we take care of those smooth transitions from one node to the other? So for the solution for this problem is we use entities, a words and phrases type entity with all the options as its variant, and whichever option the user wants to choose, accordingly the entity would get the value and transition to the desired node. Now let us see one flow end to end to understand how are we using the entities and how are we transitioning from one node to the other. Starting with the main menu, as I said, this takes care of the first intent coming from the user, which is show me main menu, start over, please start. We have created an entity called as main menu. This takes care of all the transitions happening between main menu and introduction, main menu types of moves, and main menu register node. If I open this entity, you would be able to see the dictionary values as 1, 2, and 3. I've also given options in alphabets with 1, 2, and 3 over here. And I have given, because it's a mandatory entity, the first option needs to be provided by the user to proceed ahead in the flow. I have kept it mandatory, and I have given out the response under the entity, which is, hello, what would you like to learn about self-defense today? Introduction, types of moves, or register. And then I gave a tip with you can type 1, 2, or 3 to make a selection of the menu options. I've also added an image right after this. There is also final response, as we only have a mandatory entity on this node. The final response also has the same option or the same response as under the entity. Why is this? So that if this entity already has a value and goes to the final response to execute this node, it would still be showing that response to the user rather than skipping the node altogether. Now, let us say The user wants to choose the first option, Introduction to Self-Defense. In this case, as soon as the user would write 1, this entity would get the value as 1. And once that entity has gotten the value as 1, we are transitioning from main menu to introduction node based on that entity's value. As soon as it will get the value 1, it will transition from main menu to introduction. And then it would give out the response, whatever you have given under introduction, bot says. Similarly, it would do a similar transition from main menu to types of moves, main menu to register. Let us come to the subnodes and see how they are transitioning between these subnodes and when the user is repeating their values. So if you see the response of introduction, it has importance of self-defense with some text data, and then it gives an option to the user. You can type menu to go back to the main menu, or 2 or 3 for other options. What happens when the user types 2 after this message? There needs to be an entity which takes that value and transitions to the second node, which is types of moves. Transition menu is the entity which does that. Because it is a non-mandatory entity, it does not need to be provided any bot responses. But if we see how the entity has been created, we can see the same values as 1, 2, 3 and these options in textual format. The immediate question which should come into your mind is, how will the bot differentiate whenever the user is typing ones or twos? This is where we make use of previous context tags. If you go to the advanced options of transition menu, you see the previous context tags coming from all the 3 subnodes. This takes care of the conditions where wherever the user has written 1, it would not take that value for this entity until and unless it is coming when the user is either on this node or the register node. The same thing is happening for transitioning between introduction and types of moves. We are able to use the transition menu entity, and based on the value of that entity, we are able to transition from types of moves to introduction or introduction to types of moves. If you see the transition menu over here, you will be able to see the value as 2. So once somebody is there on introduction node and the user types 2, he would be able to transition to types of moves. Similar combinations have been made for all the 3 nodes, which is introduction to register, register to introduction, introduction to types of moves to introduction, and types of moves to register, register to types of moves. The last thing which remains for this bot is what happens if the user has typed 1 and then again after inputting that value he has typed 1 again, which means the node needs to be rehit. For that we have something called as a self loop. If you see, there is a third entity called as direct menu. It takes care of transitioning to the same node. If you see, it again has the same dictionary as the other 2 entities with no previous context tag, and there is a self loop created which is based on the entity value of 1. Similarly, here the self loop will have the entity value of 2, and register will have the self loop with entity value of 3. This is how we are able to transit between one node to the other smoothly on this bot. Let us look at the live implementation using the test bot. I click on Learn Self-Defense, and my first node, which is main menu, gets hit with the text message as start. Now I would be typing 1 and my introduction node is hit. I would be typing 2. This transition takes place and types of moves node is hit. I type 3 and types of moves to register node transition takes place over here. Now that I have completed all the transitions, I would go back to menu and it goes to the first node. Let us look at another condition where right when the conversation has started, I would type 1. It would immediately go to the introduction node because that is the first thing what users should come and see on the bot. Another thing to keep in notice is, let's say if I write start and after that I write something which is completely bizarre. It says please select one option 1, 2 and 3. This is an entity reprompt because we have used a mandatory entity on the main menu node. Another condition to look at is, let's say we are continuing the conversation with 1, and then again after that I would want to see the same response. I would pick on the value as 1 again. This is where the self loop will turn into picture and the same introduction node would be hit twice. This should give you a complete clarity of how we should create a WhatsApp bot from scratch. You can also take help from a template called as Ideal WhatsApp Menu Flow. It has the same flow as an example. You can tweak around those flows to take care of your own use case. Thank you so much for joining.